But the DSA, make no mistake, is the insurgency, and they're on the rise, and they are going to kick people like Chuck Schumer out of the party.
You know what's in the air. 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 It's possibility. It's possibility. It's possibility. It's possibility.
All right, so Tim Dillon did a recent episode of his show where he addressed the Graham Plattner race in Maine, where Graham Plattner stepped down in his campaign against Susan Collins. So there was a process to replace him, and for some reason, Tim Dillon chose the most recent episode of his show to talk specifically about this process, and he had a very specific angle on it that I wanted to point out because Tim Dillon is blasting this out to a lot of people. This was a smaller procedural part of this Senate race that not a lot of people would have paid any attention to, and that includes Tim Dillon, I guess. So he's talking a little bit about DSA here, and that's really the point that he was trying to make. I guess that's why he brought this up. But he's talking about DSA candidates and people like Mamdani and contrasting that with people that he sees as not being camera-ready DSA candidates. So here's him talking about that.
Graham Plattner, another one of the DSA stars, gets taken out by a sexual assault allegation. And can you play who's stepping in for Graham Plattner? It's like a trans person. But the DSA, make no mistake, is the insurgency, and they're on the rise, and they are going to kick people like Chuck Schumer out of the party, and they are going to run their candidates, some of whom are just, completely insane. But Mamdani, so far, New York has not descended into a hellscape. So far. That doesn't mean I agree with all the DSA shit, which is like, get rid of jails, there shouldn't be any prisons, we don't need police, we don't need a border, and kind of like open season on white people, like a lot of kill whitey. A little too much kill whitey for my liking. So here to replace Graham Plattner, they have this Maine Democrat, Ashley Webb, who is running to replace Graham Plattner. Now, Graham Plattner was one of the only, because here's the thing with the DSA, and I say this lovingly because I'm an empath, it's a lot of freaks. Same thing with the far right, it's just a lot of freaks. It's a lot of people you can't put the front and center, they're not camera ready. A lot of, Mamdani is good looking, fun, charismatic, but a lot of DSA people are not camera ready. They're not ready for the spotlight. But some of these DSA people are just not camera ready. They haven't done the work. They're not media trained. And this is a great example. Ashley Webb running to replace Graham Plattner. Here she is, Miss America, roll tape.
Ashley Webb, what qualifications do you have to serve in the U.S. Senate?
Oh, I ran for office several times. Didn't win, but I did run. And then I'm a songwriter, and then I write my own books. And then I suppose my transparency, I wouldn't lie to the people and I wouldn't deceive the people.
Okay, well, this woman, this lass, this lady, our gal pal, Ashley Webb, not ready for so that's what the DSA is going to have to do. They're going to have to get their candidates camera ready because America is, if nothing else, a production. But if you people think you're going to have any hope or any chance, you need to wrestle control of that organization back from the freak show. In the same way that people on the far right are going to need to do that because you can't keep nominating like Hitler-loving, women-hating psychopaths who want to burn down every institution in America that isn't some revival church that they come from, where they're also raping people, most likely. But you can't nominate the Tate brothers either. You understand what I mean? You can't nominate Clavicular for the Senate, the far right. I know they would like to do that. They would like to nominate Clavicular, and the far left wants to nominate this person. But here's what we need to do. It's a production. Take a little lesson from Hollywood. America's you're not going to change America overnight from what it has been for the last couple of hundred years. We are a produced country.
Okay, so the first thing about this, the first thing that is pretty directly a lie, I think it's really just that Tim Dillon is too lazy to look into this for even 5 seconds, but certainly wherever he got it from was lying, if he's not purposely lying. This person that he's talking about, Ashley Webb, is not affiliated with the DSA at all, as far as I can tell. She's not endorsed by them. I can't see that she's a member. Nowhere is that printed or mentioned. So what that means is that Tim Dillon just like saw that somewhere. He saw like a post on Twitter or some shit that said that about her, and used that to make this case that the Democratic Socialists of America are not camera ready. They're going to have to do better than this. So if she was a part of DSA, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But the point is, the reason she wouldn't be, and this is the more important thing, this is the broader part, is there was a DSA associated candidate in this process, in this smaller race, you could call it, to replace Graham Plattner. And that was Troy Jackson, who is a more union-affiliated candidate and an on-the-ground organizer type of dude. And he pretty easily surpassed all other candidates, and there were several other than Ashley Webb, to be the nominee because he had the most grassroots support throughout the state. He was the most prepared to take over the grassroots operation that Graham Plattner and his campaign had built, because Troy Jackson's agenda is closest to what Graham Plattner was doing. And he was previously endorsed by DSA in a previous race, I think for governor, and I don't think he has been endorsed by them in this race yet, although I'll check that and put it up if he has. But he is the, as far as I know, the only DSA affiliated candidate that was even up for this question. So the fact that Tim Dillon missed that and just said, oh, this person looks crazy, she must be a part of the DSA, obviously that's just incredibly lazy on his part. But it's also important to understand about DSA why exactly that was wrong. Again, it's not because she's transgender or whatever. He's right that DSA will run all kinds of cool candidates, and that's why they're winning. But the reason they wouldn't do it is because they're an organization and they're moving very efficiently. And even in the case of Graham Plattner, Troy Jackson, DSA also didn't endorse Graham Plattner. Why? Because they knew he was toxic. They knew that it was likely his candidacy was going to blow up, and so they kept a couple steps away from it. Even though Graham Plattner was aligned with their values and won the primary initially with an agenda that is aligned with those values, and so Troy Jackson, another candidate who was aligned with those values, is the one who ended up actually winning the delegates in his place. And what that means is that differentiates that process from what we saw with Kamala Harris during the presidential election, at least to an extent, because it was a more grassroots organization that had the demand power in that process. So they were able to ensure that a person like Troy Jackson, who shares more of those values throughout the state and is understood that way throughout the state as a working class type candidate, that is why he is going to be the one that replaces Graham Plattner in going against Susan Collins. So all this is important to understand because that win is because of the type of grassroots organizing that DSA and affiliated campaigns and candidates have been doing. And it's actually the opposite of what Tim Dillon is saying here, that they're not camera ready. And name one DSA candidate who is not camera ready and has not run a great campaign and in many cases become the star of the campaign. It's happening all over the country. You have Francesca Hong. Abdul El Sayed is, again, loosely affiliated with DSA, although I don't believe they've endorsed him in this election. So you have this tenuous thing with the nationwide DSA because they are putting out this platform talking about no borders and police and whatnot, and that's their prerogative. But even that is different than, say, the New York DSA. It's not a wholly different organization, but there's a reason Mamdani was such an efficient campaign. It's because he has a very efficient grassroots machine behind him, which is New York DSA, which is kind of a model for the rest of the country. And a lot of those same grassroots organizing vehicles are working pretty well in Maine and have throughout this campaign, which is the reason Graham Plattner won in the first place. All of this is being missed by working class populist oracle Tim Dillon because he saw a trans person and saw that it was a good opportunity for content, as did the rest of the right-wing slop ecosystem, which is where he got this from in the first place. And ironically, conveniently, in this moment, it actually made it so that they completely missed the point of that race and the fact that Troy Jackson easily became the replacement candidate quite smoothly. So we'll get back to that a little bit, but here is another interesting clip in this where he mentioned something that happened last week where he made some little jokes about RFK Jr. on his podcast, talking about how, oh, he's not doing anything to fight the corporations. I made the point that that's because RFK Jr. is never going to be able to get any regulations across, which is the only way to fight these corporations is with regulations and laws that regulate them. government enforcement, administrative states. So apparently RFK Jr. called him and admonished him for saying that he's not doing enough to fight these corporations. And I thought that was an interesting moment. You'll see where it goes here, but also it shows us that all of these guys got aligned to the administration somewhere. So here's that.
RFK called me. He was mad at me about that. I said he wasn't doing anything. And, supposedly, and here's where I will defend RFK. I do like RFK's family a lot. And I like him and Cheryl. And I did that whole thing about we want more. I want more. I do. And he fought the glyphosate thing, and they overruled him because we're ruled by corporate oligarchs, and they're not going to let him do anything. And I think some of what he wants to do is probably silly, but some of what, I think he had a thing where he thought the candy Fun Dip gave you AIDS or something. But whatever. I mean, supposedly he's actually going to do something with ultra processed foods that's good. He's going to designate them, but he called me. He goes, hello. I said, hi. He goes, how are you? I said, good. He said, someone showed me a clip of you saying that I wasn't doing anything, and you played the clip on your show where I hit the yak with my phone. I said, well, yes. I said, well, I said that because I said, you are an exciting character to me, and I think we do have a lot of poison food. And I was a victim of it as a child. Not a victim, a willing participant, but a victim. And I think a lot of kids are victims of these corporations that are poisoning fucking kids, man. And he goes, well, of course, I agree with you, but I'm doing a lot behind the scenes that people don't know. We're the first administration to come up with a definition of an ultra-processed food. And he goes, I fought the glyphosate battle, and I lost, but I campaigned heavily for that. So I said, by the way, I will correct myself, and I'm a man of my word. Can you get something up about the ultra-processed food and see if because he's behind the scenes trying. It's hard, I guess. I like this. So 9 hours ago, and by the way, credit where credit is due. Thank you. Senate advances MAHA-friendly bill for food warning labels and junk food ad bans. So they're going to try to put warning labels on food, and they're going to try to ban junk food advertising. By the way, I think that's good. The bill, which would ban junk food advertisements targeted to children and require the Food and Drug Administration to put strong warning labels on ultra-processed foods high in sugar, salt, and saturated fat, was proposed by Senator Bernie Sanders. Wait a minute. Oh, hold on. An earlier version of the bill died when Sanders introduced back in 2004, but that was before President Trump appointed MAHA leader RFK as health secretary. So RFK's on board with it. Good for him on that.
All right, so good moment here where he's trying to look up something that RFK Jr. is actually doing, and what he finds is an article about a bill that was originally written by Bernie Sanders. So this is a perfect reflection of the kind of crux of this populist politics that we talk about in America. And the point of this article that he's reading is that this is a bill that RFK Jr. and his MAHA thing has kind of revived, and so now people are talking about it in the Senate again, but it was originally written by Bernie Sanders and it failed. So make no mistake, this bill's not going to pass. The reason is because Republicans are in power, and Republicans, by their very nature, are captured by the corporations that a bill like this would regulate. So it doesn't mean that that's impossible for either party to get it across, because, Democrats are also pretty captured by those industries, but it takes an enormous amount of political will. And that political will does not exist within the Republican Party. Not because it doesn't exist with the voters, but because the Republican Party's coalition of what got them into office, including a lot of big money, doesn't include enough portions that they really need to listen to the demands to regulate these companies. That's why it's not going to happen. That's why it originally failed when Bernie Sanders proposed it, and it's not going to work under Trump either. If it did gain momentum, I would support it, whether RFK Jr. is on board or not. But again, this is to prevent advertising of junk food. you're not going to get regulations on that while a Republican is president. And that is why America needs the DSA. Even if you don't want to vote for them, you don't think they should win, America still needs them because they are the only meaningful political force that is calling for actual regulation of those companies and is willing to pursue it. And the reason they're willing and able to pursue it in a way that other politicians simply are not is because they don't take that corporate money, and instead they build their coalition based on this grassroots support base. And you have some candidates that do that on the right as well. But when it comes to DSA, that is very much attached to a working class agenda like Medicare for all, unionization, higher wages, lower prices, going after the companies that gouge on these things, which we all know they do. That is literally the DSA agenda, and no other politician in the country will go near it. But because DSA is actually starting to win, it's forcing other politicians to pretend that they will support that. It is forcing politics in that direction. So that's really what Tim Dillon is trying to communicate about here. It's what he's trying to get at because he can sort of see it happening. But he's missing the fact that the regulation and the willingness to actually go after those corporations due to an ideological commitment to the working class via socialism, that is what is going to allow the levers of power in America to actually be used to force companies to do things in the public good rather than just in their own good. That's the whole point of democratic socialism. It's certainly the point of DSA's current agenda and their current approach to politics. So again, I thank Tim Dillon for distracting his audience from the very real electoral viability of DSA candidates as they are continuously winning elections. But there's something to be said for the fact that continuously they're throwing out these bigotries to try to distract people. It really is impressive how much the right wing went after Ashley Webb just because of the way she looks, made up a bunch of lies about her, spread a bunch of bullshit about her, and now even weeks later, Tim Dillon is coming back to that as a way to make DSA more shocking and scandalous than it is. And again, that's just because of the bigotry of his audience. It's just because he knows that's going to work. But the amount of lies and laziness that went into that messaging should concern even the bigots who appreciate his work.
I'm in the pocket, and they know they can't slow it, can't stop shit. How the game so cold, so toxic, can't drop cause they're in somebody's pocket. For me that's not it.